before Americans renamed it Earthbound Beginnings. Shigesato Itoi's first RPG, released in 1989 under the name Mother. The game was well received in Japan, and Nintendo began to prepare an English localization for worldwide distribution. However, the game had already released at the end of the NES's lifespan, and with the Super Nintendo on the horizon, the company didn't feel like it was worth the effort. Despite the port being pretty much completed, it was canned, and the team was put to work on a sequel for the next generation. Mother 2: Giegue Strikes Back was developed over the course of 5 years, and despite numerous challenges, finally made it to store shelves in 1994. It would finally get released in America a year later. With the predecessor being a Japan exclusive, it would have been confusing to call it Mother 2. So instead, they reused the name for the original port of Mother 1, Earthbound. Earthbound's release in the US is an infamous tale. Bad marketing campaign, commercial failure, gradual cult following. This initial failure scared Nintendo away from foreign markets for the next 2 installments, Mother 1+2 and Mother 3, both for the Game Boy Advance. So, for years, all Americans knew of this franchise was the strange little game for the SNES that never got a sequel. Of course, the internet sprung up soon after, so now we all know the story. It's much easier to play bootleg translated copies of the other 2 installments, and Mother has become pretty beloved in the years since the series ended. I'm a big fan of the latter 2 games, but the first entry always stood out to me as an oddball. It just doesn't fit, like a puzzle piece that's not quite the shape you're looking for. Part of this is the limitations of the medium. NES games are a lot more crude than their SNES counterparts, because the console could only do so much. Only so much space, only so many colors, and a lack of experience that 90s developers had when creating sequels. Mother 1 lacks a lot of the elements that made its sequels iconic, exacerbated by parts of the game that are rushed or unfinished. It's quite telling that the GBA re-release included an item called the Easy Ring that doubles your XP and money while reducing your encounter rate. Maybe I'm just soft, but NES games are fucking brutal, man. Still, it's got a lot of charm, and is pretty impressive for a first-time developer. The story, at least on paper, is a lot more emotional and involved than Earthbound, feeling closer to Mother 3 in spirit. It isn't the best at integrating this story into the gameplay, but I appreciate what's there. As the descendant of alien abductees, you come face to face with their adoptive child, come to conquer Earth. Throughout the game, you engage with what George and Maria have left behind, learning how they've shaped the destiny of both you and the game's main villain, Giegue. George returned to Earth and devoted his life to studying the threats he had found in order to leave behind tools for his family. Maria, who remained in space, raised Giegue like a son, showing him nothing but affection. The showdown between Ninten and Giegue is the reunion of 2 disparate branches of a family tree. Reminding the alien of that bond proves the key to his defeat when all else seems lost.
Unzip me! It's all coming back!
And as visually and technically stunning as the end of Earthbound is, the conclusion of Mother 1 feels so much more personal. There's a through line of themes and characters that carries from the beginning to the end of the game. With a better execution, it could be a masterpiece. The team at Mother Encore is doing just that with a love letter to the franchise. And I wait with bated breath to see what they come up with. Seriously, go play the demo and show them some love. As the name suggests, Mother 2 features the return of Giegue, or Giegue as per the original Japanese script. But the curious and infuriating thing is that he is one of the only things that returns. Ninten and his family are nowhere to be seen. The locations from Mother 1 are absent, and there's no mention made of the story's events. For all intents and purposes, it seems like a sequel in name only, akin to the Final Fantasy series. And that's fine. The first game wrapped up the story pretty nicely, and though the translation added a cliffhanger, it seems more like a and the adventure continues, rather than a genuine setup for a sequel. The themes, mechanics, and music carry over to bring their unique charm to a new system. But it's not a reimagining, nor is it a new setting. It's the same villain, the same world. I mean, you don't call a game Giegue Strikes Back if he's not coming back for round 2. So then why does this game feel so divorced from its predecessor? It wasn't that big an issue for Americans, who were experiencing the story for the first time with no knowledge of a sequel. But I doubt the story was written with an American audience in mind, considering it took a year to be ported internationally. Itoi is also not afraid of continuity, as Mother 3 is much more heavily tied to its predecessor. Not only does its main antagonist originate in Mother 2, but there are plenty of references sprinkled throughout, including cameos from the main cast. It's not unbelievable that Ness could have a globe-trotting adventure and never run into Ninten. After all, Earth is a big place, and Mother 1 is self-contained within the borders of America. But Giegue is inherently linked to Ninten and his family. His backstory, his vulnerability, his motivations all derive from the inner conflict between his upbringing and his duty. Even if someone else ends up defeating him, to have no mention at all of his family is rather odd, especially considering the circumstances. The backstory of Mother 2 establishes that Giegue's power eventually eroded his body and mind, forcing him to be sealed within the Devil's Machine to maintain his sanity. Discovering a prophecy that Ness and 3 others will defeat him, he decided to return to Earth, conquering it and plunging the universe into darkness. Despite his efforts, a rebel named Buzzbuzz traveled back in time to warn Ness, setting him on the path to confront Giegue, now known as Giygas. Once again, he's not taken down through raw strength, but rather through his emotions. The prayers and the hopes of the people of Earth do a number on his shattered mind, and he dissipates. But Ness has no connection to Giygas other than prophecy. He can't appeal to this monster's vulnerability like Ninten could, instead overwhelming him with the general feelings of humanity. In terms of presentation, it's a much stronger finale than Mother 1's minimalism, but it feels disappointing from a story perspective. This random nobody proves more integral to Giygas' story than his own distant cousin, the boy that dealt him his first defeat. In fact, with no mention made of the first invasion outside of the title, you could change the name and Giygas would be a completely different character. There's little that carries over in terms of appearance or personality. A few edits to the script would completely sever the link between these two games. One interpretation that I rather like is the fan game Mother Cognitive Dissonance. A bit dated mechanically, but that's just due to technical limitations. The scope of this game, especially for an RPG Maker fan game, is incredible and still stands as one of my favorite RPGs of all time. We get to see the erosion of Giegue's sanity as a result of his defeat on Earth, watching his horrific metamorphosis into Giygas. There's no changes to the story of the first 2 games, but rather additions that add color to the world. Ninten still feels oddly sidelined in the world of the second game, but isn't just forgotten, and still plays a pivotal role in Giegue's motivations. If you haven't played Cogdis, I highly recommend giving this a try as well. It's a hell of an adventure, with several endings and a big world to explore. But in terms of canon, I just can't see Earthbound as a true sequel to Mother. I think it's an amazing reimagining of the original game, being one of the most visually and audibly impressive games on the Super Nintendo, and fun as hell to boot. The story is lacking compared to its successor and predecessor, but the writing from place to place is good enough that you hardly notice. It feels like what Mother 1 was trying to be, done justice on a heftier system with more polish, and I appreciate it for what it is. If Itoi ever does return to the series, I would love to see him take on an official remake of Mother 1, rather than trying to pin a sequel. Perhaps something that places it more firmly in the world of Mother 2. Maybe using Eagleland instead of America, or a cameo of those funny critters from Saturn. But in the meantime, we have great fan games like Encore and Cogdis that bring much needed love and passion to this underrated setting. Thanks for watching! Was this video an excuse to gush about Earthbound fan games? Yes it was. But if you're listening, you still watched it, so mission success. If you've gotten this far, why not subscribe to see me talk about other stuff? I do it a lot, and sometimes I'm even funny. Plus, I'd really appreciate it. Let me know in the comments if you have any suggestions for future topics. Until next time, see ya!